To the Point with Michael Williams.
The congressional session resumes this week, topping the agenda of the impeachment inquiry of President Trump. But what does that mean for other issues? Will anything else get done? A lot to cover. Good morning and welcome. The recess coming to an end. The Democrats pushing forward down the impeachment path in the House, while President Trump says he will not cooperate, and he says Democrats are trying to overturn the results of the 2016 election. Joining me, a longtime familiar face, one of the members of Congress who would vote on an impeachment measure, Representative Lois Frankel from our area, Democrat from West Palm Beach, and before going to Congress, a longtime West Palm Beach mayor. Thank you for coming in. I do want to note, we did invite Republican Treasure Coast Congressman Brian Mast. His office said, unfortunately, he had a previous commitment, so hopefully we'll catch up with him in the very near future for the Republican perspective. Nonetheless, Congresswoman Frankel, thank you for being here. You called for impeachment proceedings at the end of September after details about the president's July phone call with the president of Ukraine. Some Democrats had called for impeachment inquiry earlier. You did not. Why did you hold off, and what was the tipping point for you?
Well, first of all, Michael, always great to be with you.
Always a pleasure to have you.
Well, you know, I've been on your show before, and I think I've mentioned a lot of these issues. The president, since day one, he's probably said or done something every day that has shocked my conscience. I felt that although he probably had committed impeachable offenses with his obstruction on the Russian interference with our election, that it just, given the dynamics in the Senate, given all the work that we had to do in the House on very important bread and butter issues, that it was really not worth the effort to go forward with an impeachment. I was in favor of going forward with an investigation, which many of the committees are still doing. But this last incident, or I should say incidents, this phone call to me was a bridge too far. This president abused his power by asking a foreign leader to do him a favor to help with getting some dirt on an election opponent. He undermines our election, and he puts our national security at stake. So for me, that was it. And he confessed. There's a transcript from the White House that confirms it. And quite frankly, I'm ready to vote for impeachment.
Let me give you the Republican point of view as expressed, or a Republican point of view, at least as expressed by one commentator, Wall Street Journal, Kim Strassel, Potomac Watch, widely read, said in commentary, simply no evidence of what House Democrats have made the central claim of their inquiry, that Mr. Trump engaged in a, quote, quid pro quo by withholding aid to Ukraine, military aid, unless it, quote, opened an investigation into former Vice President Joe Biden. She said it simply does not exist. It can be implied, it can be inferred, but it does not exist. And not her words, but the president, is that this is a witch hunt.
Well, let me just say this. Although I think there was a quid pro quo, you don't need a quid pro quo to go forward. I mean, the fact that he asked for a favor of a foreign leader to do some dirty work on his behalf to help himself with his reelection, that in itself is abuse of power. That in itself is underlining our elections. That itself, given the circumstances, undermined our national security, because Ukraine is very, very dependent on the United States.
The Republicans argue you don't like the outcome, Democrats, of the 2016 election. Right. You're trying to force a do-over instead of let voters decide in 2020. Speak to that. You hear it all the time.
Well, let me put it this way. They're correct. I don't like the outcome.
But they're saying you're trying to force a change and let voters decide in 2020.
Well, you know
one way or the other.
Well, you know, one way or the other, that may occur. But the fact of the matter is, at some point, and the point came to me, you say enough is enough. The president has to be held accountable. No person should be allowed to abuse the power of office like we see with this president.
Another complaint that if it's so important to have an impeachment inquiry, why not have a vote about proceeding with an impeachment inquiry? Happened with Presidents Clinton and Nixon. Republicans argue it should happen now. Let every Democrat and Republican in the House say where they stand with a House vote before they move ahead or moved ahead with this inquiry. Why not? Why not have a straight-up vote?
It's
not required, but it's been happened before.
What is that? Is that really a technicality? It's not required in the Constitution. And the fact of the matter is, if we are going to impeach the president, which I believe we should, unless there's some exculpatory evidence, which in fact, Michael, he's obstructing everything. You know, if he
says he won't cooperate.
Well, if he won't cooperate, if he has exculpatory evidence, let him bring it forward. But right now, there is enough. It's very, very simple. He confessed. His White House transcript confirms it, and this president should be impeached.
Let me ask.
That'll be the vote.
Let me ask you one more question on this particular specific topic. And this goes to the heart of people in America, saying, you know, it's always when it benefits one side, they show high rage over something. But they say, where were Democrats in 2016 when they were pawing after a Steele dossier that was looking for foreign dirt on Donald Trump? Where was the high dudgeon from Democrats then when they were looking for that, the now infamous Steele dossier, looking to dig up dirt on Donald Trump? Democrats weren't complaining then. But now, when he has a call with Ukraine that Republicans argue shows no quid pro quo, now it's time for an impeachment inquiry.
Well, I guess to quote Donald Trump, that's fake news. You didn't have the
everybody says that nowadays.
No, but you don't. You didn't have the president of the United States, Barack Obama, making calls to anybody to try to find dirt on any political opponent. So I think those are, I hate to say it, those are what I call Fox News talking points. I don't believe there's any truth to it.
Let's move on to a slightly different topic, equally important, in fact, really different topics that you've tried to talk about at town halls. You've had town halls on Medicare, prescription drug costs, cybersecurity, child care centers, things near and dear to your heart. You think Congress is going to be able to get any of that done in the next year with impeachment fervor consuming, it seems, every moment in D.C.?
Well, there's an old saying, which is you need to be able to chew gum and walk. And I can tell you that Democrats are doing that. And within the next couple of weeks, we're going to introduce probably one of the most far-reaching bills to reduce the cost of drugs, which has just become out of hand. Michael, I had a town hall just yesterday, and I heard stories of people, they go to the drugstore with a prescription in hand, they leave empty-handed because they can't afford the copay. You know what the most popular gadget in the drugstore are? The pill cutters, because people can't afford to take an entire dose. So listen what we're going to do. Next week, we're going to vote, or maybe next week or in the next couple of weeks, we'll vote on a bill that will, number one, remove the ban that prohibits Medicare from negotiating drug prices. And so Medicare is going to negotiate drug prices. Those drug prices are going to be for all Americans, and we're also going to put a cap on what Medicare patients have to pay for their drugs.
Does any of that get past the GOP Senate?
Well, you know, the Republicans, they've been saying they want to reduce the cost of drugs. The president said that. We'll send that legislation. That's going to be up to Mitch McConnell. But I'll tell you what, we have sent lots of very far-reaching progressive legislation to him.
And to that point, I promised I'd move ahead, but I have to back up. Some say, well, isn't this political theater on impeachment? Because in the GOP-controlled Senate, even if articles of impeachment are sent up, the Senate's not going to convict.
Well, you know, again, I resisted for a while, even though I did not want to. Sometimes you say, enough is enough. Let me say something, Michael.
Of course.
This president gets more unhinged and more dangerous every day, and the time has come where people have to say, stop.
You've expressed, as we turn to a different topic on foreign policy, your objections. I have many across the aisle on his decision to remove the limited number of U.S. troops we had in Syria, which critics, on again, a bipartisan criticism, said you're going to immediately invite Turkey to go in and go after the Kurds, who have been allies with the U.S. in the fight against ISIS. The president on Friday mentioned possible sanctions against Turkey. You're on the State and Foreign Operations Committee. Where are we right now? Where can we be? We're already seeing attacks. We're already seeing the Kurds under fire. Some have said the U.S. will never find a reliable ally again with this kind of action. Where do we go from here?
Well, I guess this is a bipartisan criticism of the president. This action is very dangerous. It's dangerous to our national security and that to our allies. Remember the days of the beheadings, when we saw ISIS chopping off people's heads, where ISIS was throughout, not only in Syria, but getting into our European countries. We were able to, with the help of the Kurds, who have lost thousands and thousands and thousands of people fighting ISIS, to at least eliminate their territory. We haven't eliminated ISIS, but we've eliminated their territory. And now, what's going to happen is this. We're abandoning our ally, the Kurds. They will probably be decimated by the Turkish government. They will probably be an ethnic cleansing, and we are going to lose credibility throughout the world. In fact, today, this week, we saw for the first time ever in the UN, the United States joined with Russia against Europe in pushing back the threat of Turkey.
I want to bring up one other topic. I know there's so much on your plate, but this is local. Late last week, you were part of a news conference. You said it was, quote, cruel and unjust for a Palm Beach County judge to have sentenced a young man, we've covered the story extensively here at WPTV, to 10 days in jail. He overslept. He was on jury duty, overslept, went to jail. The judge later said, you know what, I'm going to back off. Right. I want to essentially, in layman's terms, be able to vacate that sentence. Right. But nonetheless, there are many lawmakers now state and now a congresswoman saying judge needs to be looked into. What should happen to the judge in your opinion? What are your thoughts on this topic?
Let me just, first of all, I have to disclose this. I've known this young man since he was age 3.
Okay. Mr. Somerville.
His grandfather worked for me when I was mayor. I know this family very well. I've been to church with them. I've been to Christmas parties, funerals, weddings. I've seen this young man grow up. He is an honorable, decent, young, respectful man who's never been in trouble, maybe a couple of traffic tickets. Look, the judge also, you know what, he has a decent reputation. The way I feel about it is I'm not asking for anything to be done, any retribution to the judge. I don't think the family wants retribution to the judge. I'll leave that to others. But what I want to make it clear is that, in my opinion, and the opinion of many people in our community, that sentence was unjust, it was cruel, it didn't make sense, and it had the opposite effect of, instead of trying to have this young man and others who may have heard about this be impressed about the justice system, it has the opposite effect.
Let me ask you, given all the debates these days about executive overreach and the legislative branch getting involved in judicial matters and the like, given all of that and the fact that you have known him all your life, should you have recused yourself from any comment on this? Well, no. I mean, my comment is, again, I made it clear that I was not advocating any action to the judge. That was not up to me. But I think any member of the public, and I consider myself that, is that when someone is not treated fairly or justly, you should speak out, and I spoke out. Closing thoughts as you look to the hill on a plate that will be very full over the next year. Yeah. Your closing thoughts. My closing thoughts are this. I know people at home are very anxious because they approach me every single day. They're worried about the state of our government, and listen, I just have to say is keep the faith. There are a lot of good people still in government. Yeah, the president, as I said, I think he's dangerous and I think he's unhinged, but we're going to be fighting back. Congresswoman Lois Frankel, Democrat, longtime familiar face here. And again, we invited Brian Mastin. We hope to have the Republican perspective soon. Thank you.